The Shadow World. Inside the Global Arms Trade. By Andrew Feinstein. Narrated by Gildart Jackson. Copyright 2011 by Andrew Feinstein. This unabridged audiobook is recorded by arrangement with Farrar, Straus & Giroux, LLC, and was produced in the year 2011 by Tantor Media Incorporated, which holds the copyright thereto. Show me who makes a profit from war, and I'll show you how to stop the war. Henry Ford. Once a gun runner, always a gun runner. Ephraim de Veroli. Prologue. The prince alighted from his gleaming silver-blue jet, his mind firmly on the task at hand, to persuade his close friend to go to war. Prince Bandar bin Sultan bin Abdul Aziz Al Saud, Saudi Arabia's ambassador to Washington, was in Crawford, Texas, in August 2002 to visit the President of the United States, his close friend, George W. Bush. At the President's ranch, the two men, comfortable in one another's company, chatted for an hour. The President was in determined mood. Bandar's exhortation that he should not back off, that he should complete what his father had failed to do, that he should destroy the regime of Saddam Hussein once and for all, gratified the President. Satisfied by their mutual reinforcement, the dapper, enigmatic prince and the cowboy President took lunch with their wives and 7 of Bandar's 8 children. A few weeks later, President Bush met the British Prime Minister Tony Blair at Camp David. The two leaders declared they had sufficient evidence that Iraq was developing weapons of mass destruction to justify their acting against Saddam, with or without the support of the United Nations. Prince Bandar's role in Washington and London was unique: diplomat, peacemaker, bagman for covert CIA operations, and arms dealer extraordinaire. He constructed a special relationship between Washington, Riyadh, and London, and made himself very, very wealthy in the process. The £75 million Airbus, painted in the colours of the Prince's beloved Dallas Cowboys, was a gift from the British arms company BAE Systems. It was a token of gratitude for the Prince's role, as son of the country's defence minister, in the biggest arms deal the world has seen. The Al-Yamamah, the Dove, deal signed between the United Kingdom and Saudi Arabia in 1985 was worth about £40 billion. It was also arguably the most corrupt transaction in trading history. Over £1 billion was paid into accounts controlled by Bandar. The Airbus, maintained and operated by BAE at least until 2007, was a little extra presented to Bandar on his birthday in 1988. A significant portion of the more than £1 billion was paid into personal and Saudi embassy accounts at the venerable Riggs Bank, opposite the White House on Pennsylvania Avenue, Washington, D.C. The bank of choice for presidents, ambassadors, and embassies had close ties to the CIA, with several bank officers holding full agency security clearance. Jonathan Bush, uncle of the president, was a senior executive of the bank at the time. But Riggs and the White House were stunned by the revelation that from 1999 money had inadvertently flowed from the account of Prince Bandar's wife to 2 of the 15 Saudis among the 9/11 hijackers. On the night of the 4th of August, 2000, police barged into room 341 of a tawdry hotel in Cinisello Balsamo, a nondescript working-class town in northern Italy, just outside Milan. There they found a pale, fleshy 53-year-old man lying amidst a jumble of bedclothes and underwear, a pornographic film flickering on the wall in the background. He was surrounded by 4 prostitutes, Russian, Albanian, Kenyan, and Italian. Cocaine littered the floor, together with $500,000 worth of diamonds. Leonid Minin, a Ukrainian-born Israeli and part owner of the Europa Hotel, used his 2-bedroom suite as a bedroom, office, and den of debauchery. A cursory search unearthed hundreds of pages of documents in English, Russian, German, Dutch, and French. They revealed Minyan's role in an extraordinary network of defense companies, arms dealers, banks, front companies, drug runners, bent politicians, intelligence agents, government officials, ex-Nazis, and militant Islamists. Among the documents was correspondence detailing the sale of millions of dollars of weapons to the Liberian government in exchange for diamond and timber concessions. Investigators used the flight logs and end-user certificates they found to reconstruct numerous deliveries of weapons and materiel into West Africa and other conflict zones. A number of these deliveries were made using Leonid Minyan's personal British Aircraft Corporation 111 jet, which still bore the insignia of the Seattle Sonics basketball team, which had previously owned the plane. Manufactured by a company in the BAE Group, Minyan's jet was more basic than Prince Bandar's opulent gift, but its journeys were no less significant in their impact. The horror descended on Freetown at 3 a.m. on the 6th of January 1999. Rebel elements of the army joined forces with troops of the Revolutionary United Front, RUF, to invade the capital of Sierra Leone in an orgy of killing and destruction. They called it Operation No Living Thing. This most horrific civil war, on a continent of civil wars, had begun in March 1991 as a spillover from Liberia, which itself had been racked by internecine violence since an invasion on Christmas Eve 1989 by a small group of armed men led by a former government junior minister, Charles Gankay Taylor, with purported links to the CIA. He extended his war into neighboring Sierra Leone to exploit that country's massive diamond wealth through the RUF and its psychopath leader, Foday Sanko, a dismissed army corporal and sometime photographer. Throughout its 11-year campaign, the RUF killed and mutilated the very civilians it claimed to champion in an orgy of bewildering cruelty, while looting the country's rich diamond reserves and trading them profitably with outsiders through Charles Taylor and his network that included Leonid Minyan. After Sanko was captured in late 1998, his deputy commander, Sam Boukari, a.k.a. Mosquito, declared that to free his imprisoned leader, he was going to kill everyone in the country to the last chicken. In the first few days of 1999, the rebels infiltrated Freetown by joining civilians flocking into the city from the violence-ravaged surrounding towns. Their weapons were wrapped in dirty bundles. Another small group had fought its way to Mount Oriole, overlooking the east end of Freetown. A rugged bush road winds from the top of the hill down to Savage Square, the heart of the East End. All they needed was extra weaponry. On the 22nd of December 1998, Leonid Minyan had personally ferried guns and other equipment in his BAC 111 from Niamey in Niger to Monrovia, Liberia, where they were offloaded onto vehicles of President Charles Taylor's armed forces and ferried to the outskirts of Freetown. With the safe arrival of the illegal arms, the order to attack was given. In the early hours of the 6th of January, under cover of near-total darkness, the rebels made for Pedemba Road Prison. They blasted open the gates and freed and armed the detainees. Foday Sanko, however, had been removed from the prison 2 weeks before. What followed was a 2-day apocalyptic horror. Thousands of armed teenage soldiers, almost all of them wearing thick bandages on the side of their head where incisions had been made to pack crack cocaine under their skin, swarmed the city. Insane and delirious, they attacked the homes of civilians, killing those who refused to give them money, who were insufficiently welcoming, who looked well-fed, or whose face they simply disliked. Thousands of innocent people were gunned down in their houses, rounded up and massacred on the streets, thrown from the upper floors of buildings, used as human shields, and burned alive in cars and houses. They had their limbs hacked off with machetes, eyes gouged out with knives, hands and jaws smashed with hammers, and bodies burned with boiling water. Women and girls were systematically sexually abused, and children and young people abducted by the hundreds. A group of rebels raided a World Food Program warehouse looking for sustenance, but instead discovered hundreds of brand-new machetes intended for the cultivation of food. The machetes were used to crudely and methodically cut off the hands of hundreds of people, adults, children, even tiny babies. Because they had heard that an aid agency was sewing up severed hands, they took the hands with them. At night, during the blackout, rebels chanting, "We want peace, we have come for peace," locked up whole families in their houses and set them ablaze so there would be light in the area. Fire was everywhere. Torches, raffia mats rolled and soaked in kerosene, ignited home after home. Flames ravished the hills. Family after family were burned alive. Next to a roadblock, a female soldier checked the virginity of her captives, prodding with her fingers after the girls were stripped naked and pinned to the ground. Then she made her suggestions to the senior officers of her unit, and in the city, on the grounds of the State House where the rebels ran a command post, hundreds of young women were rounded up to be raped in the offices or on the walkways. Everywhere, hoping to be undesired, the youthful tried to look haggard, and with mixtures of water, soil, and ash, the light-skinned tried to make themselves dark. Distinct units existed for committing particular acts: the Burn House Unit, Cut Hands Commando, and Bloodshed Squad. Each had a trademark approach to their task: the Kill Man No Blood Unit, who beat people to death without shedding blood, or the Born Naked Squad, who stripped their victims before killing them. In less than 2 weeks, almost 100,000 people were driven from their homes. Tens of thousands were left maimed and bloodied. 6,000 civilians were murdered. The arms trade did not cause this barbarism, but it facilitated and fueled it. At the time, Sierra Leone was the world's least developed country. Most of its people lived on less than 70 cents a day, and life expectancy was 37. Charles Taylor, Leonid Minin, and their associates, who included the Al-Qaeda network, made tens of millions of dollars out of the gun-running and diamond trading operations associated with the brutal Civil War. Introduction. In our 21st century world, the lethal combination of technological advances, terrorism, global crime, state-sponsored violence, and socio-economic inequality has raised instability and insecurity to alarming levels. At the same time, the engine that has driven this escalation, the global arms trade, grows ever more sophisticated, complex, and toxic in its effects. It might therefore be thought essential that the world's democratic nations should address this trade collectively and urgently. If it must exist, then surely it should be coherently regulated, legitimately financed, effectively policed and transparent in its workings, and meet people's need for safety and security. Instead, the trade in weapons is a parallel world of money, corruption, deceit, and death. It operates according to its own rules, largely unscrutinized, bringing enormous benefits to the chosen few, and suffering and immiseration to millions. The trade corrodes our democracies, weakens already fragile states, and often undermines the very national security it purports to strengthen. Author's note: this book will deal primarily with the trade in conventional weapons, large and small, which, unlike weapons of mass destruction, are legitimate tools of government. This includes military vehicles, aircraft, ships, submarines, helicopters, missiles and bombs, as well as small arms and ammunition. I will only refer to nuclear weapons as they intersect with the functioning of the arms industry and the trade in the goods it produces, which I refer to as the arms trade. Global military expenditure is estimated to have totaled $1.6 trillion in 2010, $235 for every person on the planet. This is an increase of 53% since 2000 and accounts for 2.6% of global gross domestic product. Today, the United States spends almost $1 trillion a year on national security, with a defense budget of over $703 billion. The trade in conventional arms, both big and small, is worth about $60 billion a year. Author's note: this figure varies considerably from year to year. The trade in small arms is worth about $4 billion a year and has an impact far beyond this monetary value because small and light weapons are easy to use and maintain and are abundantly available. The US, Russia, the UK, France, Germany, Sweden, Holland, Italy, Israel, and China are regularly identified as the largest producers and traders of weapons and materiel. Author's note: materiel refers to the equipment, apparatus, and supplies of a military force. Almost always shrouded in secrecy, arms deals are often concluded between governments who then turn to manufacturers, many of which are now privately owned, to fulfill them. In some instances, governments enter into contracts directly with commercial suppliers, and companies do business with each other or third parties, some of whom are not even legal entities. These include non-state actors, from armed militias to insurgent groups and informal clusters of terrorists, and pariah states. The sale and supply of weapons often involves murky middlemen or agents, also referred to as arms brokers or dealers. Author's note: dealers are generally defined as middlemen who buy the weapons and sell them on for a profit, while brokers do not own the weapons but broker their sale either for cash or for commodities such as diamonds, oil, or timber. Many arms deals contain elements of all these arrangements, stretching across a continuum of legality and ethics from the official or formal trade to what I will refer to as the shadow world, also known as the grey and black markets. The grey market alludes to deals conducted through legal channels but undertaken covertly. They are often utilized by governments to have an illicit impact on foreign policy. Black market deals are illegal in conception and execution. Both black and grey deals frequently contravene arms embargoes, national and multilateral laws, agreements, and regulations. In practice, the boundaries between the three markets are fuzzy. With bribery and corruption de rigueur, there are very few arms transactions that are entirely above board. Author's note: it should be noted that clearly not all arms sales are illegal, and that illegality is often determined by particular national and international legal standards applicable at the time of specific transactions. On occasion, the legal framework governing a particular deal might be unclear due to issues of jurisdiction or changing legal standards during the course of the deal. Hence, the use of terms such as bribery, corruption, commissions, etc., must be understood in their context and are not necessarily allegations of law-breaking in all cases. Similarly, and quite obviously, not everyone involved, directly or indirectly, in the arms trade is engaging in criminal activity, or protecting or condoning such activity. The arms trade operates on collusion between world leaders, intelligence operatives, corporations at the cutting edge of technological development, financiers and bankers, transporters, shady middlemen, money launderers, and common criminals. This unholy alliance attempts to avoid responsibility for the gruesome consequences of their actions with the oft-quoted mantra, "Guns don't kill people, people kill people." But even technologically advanced forms of warfare, such as the use of unmanned drone aircraft to eliminate enemies, cannot minimize the sheer brutality of the trade and the destruction it causes. Author's note: this sanitized combat is criticized because it hasn't significantly reduced the killing of innocents. It also raises the moral issue of whether a controller, sitting sometimes hundreds of miles from a conflict zone, might not kill more readily and uncontrollably at such a physical and psychological remove. Against this is set the contention, heard most loudly in the wake of the atomic explosions in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that targeted killing can minimize later violence and death. Supplying conflicts from world wars to the Cold War to the War on Terror, from small insurgencies to large-scale revolutions, arms dealers, weapons manufacturers, and even governments have fueled and perpetuated tensions in pursuit of profit, on occasion selling to all sides in the same conflict. In addition to the primary moral issue of the destruction caused by their products, there is the related concern of the opportunity cost of the arms business. For while a weapons capability is clearly required in our unstable and aggressive world, the scale of defense spending in countries both under threat and peaceable results in the massive diversion of resources from crucial social and development needs, which in itself feeds instability. A stark example of this cost could be seen in the early years of South Africa's democracy. With the encouragement of international arms companies and foreign states, the government spent around £6 billion on arms and weapons it didn't require at a time when its president claimed the country could not afford to provide the antiretroviral drugs needed to keep alive the almost 6 million of its citizens living with HIV and AIDS. $300 million in commissions were paid to middlemen, agents, senior politicians, officials, and the African National Congress, ANC, South Africa's ruling party itself. In the following 5 years, more than 355,000 South Africans died avoidable deaths because they had no access to the life-saving medication, while the weapons remain largely underused. The corrupt and secretive way the industry operates undermines accountable democracy in both buying and selling countries. The arms trade accounts for over 40% of corruption in all world trade. The combination of the sheer magnitude of the contracts, the very small number of people who make the purchasing decisions, and the cloak of national security lends itself to bribery and corruption on a massive scale. Some states are active participants in this illegality, while many more are content to countenance the behavior. Almost all governments make weapons procurement decisions with huge financial implications that are neither cost-effective nor in the best interests of their countries. And the goods purchased often cost far more than initially quoted, are not able to perform as promised, and are produced or delivered years behind schedule. There is clearly some need to maintain national security and commercial confidentiality. However, the all-encompassing secrecy that often characterizes arms deals hides corruption, conflicts of interest, poor decision-making, and inappropriate national security choices. As a consequence, this trade, which should be among the most highly controlled and regulated, is one of the least scrutinized and accountable areas of government and private activity. Subsequent attempts to cover up malfeasance lead to additional illegal activity and the weakening of government. For instance, in the South African arms deal, Parliament was undermined, anti-corruption bodies were disbanded, and prosecuting authorities were weakened in order to protect politicians all the way up to the president. It is hardly surprising that the agenda of weapons manufacturers and their supporters is at the center of the governance process. For there is a continuous revolving door through which people move between government, the military, and the arms industry. The companies not only make significant financial contributions to politicians and their parties, but also provide employment opportunities to former state employees, retired officers, and defeated politicians. Nowhere is this more apparent than in the United States of America. The pervasive, largely unchallenged common interests of defense manufacturers, the Pentagon, intelligence agencies, and members of Congress and the executive suggest that the U.S. is effectively a national security state. This ensures that irrelevant weapons programs, which do little to make the country more secure, continue to harvest billions of dollars in every budgetary cycle. For instance, during these straitened economic times, the United States will ultimately spend over $380 billion on a fighter jet that is of little use in current conflicts and has been described by a former Pentagon aerospace designer as a total piece of crap. The real security and economic interests of ordinary American taxpayers are sacrificed on the altar of this legalized bribery. The revolving door of people and money perpetuates what C. Wright Mills described as the military metaphysic, a militaristic definition of reality justifying a permanent war economy. This, despite the warning of the former general, Dwight D. Eisenhower, in his farewell address as President of the United States. With the conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry, in the councils of government we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. Within a year of George W. Bush assuming the presidency, over 30 arms industry executives, consultants, and lobbyists occupied senior positions in his administration. Half a dozen senior executives from Lockheed Martin alone were given crucial appointments in the Bush government during 2001. By the end of that year, the Pentagon had awarded the company one of the biggest military contracts in U.S. history. Dick Cheney had served George W. Bush's father as Secretary of Defense before becoming CEO of Halliburton. During his tenure as Vice President under Bush Jr., Cheney's former company garnered over $6 billion in contracts from the Department of Defense. Its oil-related contracts in Iraq trebled that number. Cheney still held stock in the company and left office a very wealthy man. Too little has changed under the Obama administration. But it is not just the contracts. It is also the pernicious influence that this complex has on all aspects of governance, including economic and foreign policy, and decisions to go to war. This unease is intensified because a large part of what it does is not open to scrutiny by lawmakers, the judiciary, the media, or civil society watchdogs. The arms industry and its powerful political friends have forged a parallel political universe that largely insulates itself against the influence or judgment of others by invoking national security. This is the shadow world. The United Kingdom is hostage to a similar collusion between the main arms companies, especially the large and powerful BAE Systems, and the executive branch of government, which acts as salesperson-in-chief for the industry. This relationship intensified during the premiership of Margaret Thatcher, and Tony Blair's New Labour happily followed suit. Over the past decade, BAE has been investigated for bribery in at least 5 separate arms deals. Author's note: until 1999, the company was known as British Aerospace, and thereafter as BAE Systems. Throughout, I refer to the company in its various manifestations as BAE. In France, where parts of the industry are still in state hands, arms companies receive similarly enthusiastic levels of support from governments of every stripe. But the country's media and opinion formers, with rare exceptions, appear mostly unconcerned by the dubious practices of their defense industry. That said, 1 or 2 investigating prosecutors have been more intrepid than their British counterparts in seeking legal recourse in cases of grand corruption. German, Swedish, and Italian companies also receive massive assistance from their governments. Prosecutors in Germany do investigate arms companies, but seldom with any publicly embarrassing consequences. In Italy and Sweden, where Saab has partnered BAE in many of the deals under scrutiny, investigations are rare. The relationship between the defense industry and government is even more symbiotic in less democratic countries. The role of the weapons business is a crucial component of the People's Liberation Army's vast and growing commercial empire, which has become a defining feature of China's autocratic command capitalism. While weapons have always been a tool of foreign policy, China's use of cheap arms sales to expand its influence has reached unprecedented levels. Those who operate the levers of power of the Russian state, the so-called Siloviki around Vladimir Putin, exercise complete control over the country's arms business, which is an important source of patronage. China and Russia sell weapons to many of the world's despots, including Sudan, Syria, Burma, Iran, North Korea, and Zimbabwe. Author's note: the latter two countries are predominantly supplied by China. Their small arms proliferate in conflict zones.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?